Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves some tracks off of an album from an act named Hounds Jackals. It's actually this project titled A Death Night in Heaven, Nemesis, Elite Task Force of the Abyss. And if we switch over to here, this is going to be kind of a unique review session because this is music similar to the previous album that I reviewed from Hounds Jackals titled Don't Stiff the Ferryman. If I go to the Bandcamp page where they also have the music available for purchase if you're interested, although to be fair this has been sold out, Hounds Jackals was created to raise mental health awareness using games, music, magic and interactive media, dealing with important topics in entertaining and offbeat ways for people to learn about creativity and its connections to health. And so I feel that all of this is very good cause, and I did enjoy my time reviewing the previous sort of like session of Don't Stiff the Ferryman. That's also available on their Bandcamp and YouTube channels. Today we're going to be reviewing through 6 tracks off of this album from start till finish, starting with the self-titled, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go, let's do it. What have we got? I do like the spy theme with the brass there.
Turning fiends to saints, her dream. Who can block her scheme? Nemesis, Nemesis for there, Nemesis. That night a nightmare, fighting for chaos wherever disorder across the spheres and up there. Nemesis is there.
I mean, it's a lot to take in, for sure. It's intensely curious.
She wins the cosmos. All good as she thinks they should. Constant trade through heaven's gate before the planned launch date. Sabotage can't be late. Nemesis, Nemesis will there. Nemesis, lost and spider. Time for chaos wherever disorder across the spheres of there. Nemesis is there.
Nemesis is a code name for the Abyss's very heavy task force. Its purpose: to defend sentience freedom against the Celestials. Ruthless entities determined to rule the cosmos with absolute order.
Nemesis.
Sorry, what? I'm gonna back a little bit and just kind of absorb that. Freedom against the celestial entity is...
Cosmos with absolute order.
Nemesis will there. Nemesis, so he saved there. Fight for chaos wherever disorder across the spheres and there. Nemesis is there. Nemesis will there. Nemesis.
Okay, that's kind of fascinating for sure. Nemesis, Elite Task Force of the Abyss with Mina as vocalist. With Vimy and Sammy, Angel and... Angel? Ari Dupont as a musician. Keeper of the Tuba of Fate. Jackal of all trades, everything else. And Hounds Jackals with the branding at the end. Very cool, Cat. It does. No, that's good. That's a good start to proceedings for sure. For sure. Track number 1. So yeah, this is Nemesis, Elite Task Force of the Abyss. You know, track number 1 for today. In this section, I'm going to give you my sort of overall thoughts on the track. I'm going to do this for each of the 6 songs we're going to be listening through today. And then we're going to be offering an overall conclusion at the end. But these are I'm going to attempt to sort of like break down these tracks and understand them better. And it should be a good ride. Like, this was a lot to take in on a first listen basis. My best guess at what this track is about is that, again, as the skull was talking about, this is about the celestial bodies, the angels, trying to sort of become dictators of the heavens and the cosmos, and there is this kind of team of miscreants, the elite task force of the abyss, who are rising up to take back, I suppose, and fight against them. And it's interesting because you got Mina doing both sides, with some of the heavenly vocals with really sort of wonderful vibrato on it, and we hold these notes really elegantly. But there's also the duality between that and the mood of some of the more spoken parts, a bit of danger that resides really neatly alongside those spy themes on the tuba and other instruments. But just to have the different voicings just makes things even more fascinating. Kind of playing 2 characters at once is impressive. It's just within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot there, but I don't feel like there's any filler to this piece here. We don't overstay our welcome by any means. If you actually know, it's 3 minutes because we had the extended outro section there providing credits and everything. I just want to sort of give a shout out to that. I just feel it's so important to provide personality and character with something you're putting out, especially if it's an audio-visual experience. You don't want to take the listener's attention for granted, and if they're willing to stay to the end of the song, they're typically there to find out more. At the start, you have the kind of whispered Nemesis line, which is very kind of creepy, and we hit the notes clearly. We have really sort of like solid vocal technique across the board throughout this track, and we have different ways of expressing ourselves. But I like that we navigate the instrumental arrangement there. We have that drum kit driving forth with an 8-note groove across the kicks, the hi-hats and snares there, with some sort of cymbal shimmers peppered throughout the track to help segment the piece. You have the boom, 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 that kind of main sort of melodic motif there that you go back to a lot of the time, and it provides this sort of like sense of danger to it, like we're on a mission somewhere. And we have these background kind of vocals or choirs of the bah, for a lot of suspense and drama there. These pads in the background, they're building things up. And the strings as well in that upper register above those kind of ohs of those like choirs there just make the track sound absolutely huge in those crescendos. With very kind of timid little woodwinds there, with some unison notes, just kind of creating more of a rhythmic bit of ear candy, I suppose, and anything else alongside a lot of the more consistent 8-note layers of the percussion. It's just nice to be filling out that frequency spectrum. I like that with the metering of the vocals, especially around that like 50-second minute mark there. We aren't sort of limiting ourselves to 4/4. We're adding beats as we need to, an extra bar to extend a line there or kind of build into a different section there, sort of twist expectations for the listener. I like that the drum kit also adjusts its sort of main grooves and progressions there to establish variety compositionally within the piece. And we have some kind of bells there, like the bells are tolling through the executor, especially with the kind of religious symmetry, symbolism or like imagery there. That makes a lot of sense. And structurally, the track is really well sort of like set up. I like that we, again, have our sort of fundamentals of like the kind of the bass lines, like the brass, etc., the strings, and the vocal layers, both melodies and harmonies sing together, or sort of providing sort of different opinions on it. But I just like that we don't, again, even within a 3-minute piece there, we're offering different shades of the story to people. And we're not just holding those string parts either there. We would kind of chop and change it, and we kind of make more use of these instruments outside of their core rhythms that are established there. We develop them and give them different personalities depending on how much room is available. I think that the different vocal timbre that we have to the skull around the 2-minute 20 mark is cool because it's a different type of voicing there. It's something you pay attention to because it's like, oh wait, what is this twist in the tail there? Is this more of a crux or the main sort of like message of what this piece is about there? Is that the kind of mission that we're going on? You know, it piques interest. And as we continue through the track with varying sort of snare fills there, transitioning between parts with the Nemesis again being sung heavenly by the vocalist, meaning like really great singer, very very comfortable head chest voice there, and we navigate our, you know, when we're heavenly, we're up high. And I sort of want to talk thematically about that chorus section because it's interesting. There's a sense of real sort of danger and kind of like dread to some of those verse and intro passages there, especially with those minor origins to the spy themes. But when we get into the Nemesis part, it's almost like we're celebrating the opportunity for an unheavenly sort of like group of members there, the the task force. It's like we're almost saying like they are the future of the cosmos, so therefore they're something we should be positive about. And it's this kind of push and pull between the minor and major orients of this piece, especially with the softness of some of the vocal layers in those chorus. They're really sort of like elevated and make it sound really pretty sounding. And it's just a nice sort of like, it's a bit manipulative, but like in a positive sense for the piece. Because we've got other orchestral elements there that build it up as we go forward and forward and forward. And it does really work well as kind of like a title music, because it is the main title music of this. It's endearing the way that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it also ironically kind of sets a precedent for the intensity of what we're coming up against. I feel like people who are into this kind of music or into this kind of audiovisual experience or the subject matter that's being discussed will really get behind it. And I feel that for people that are more sort of like casual listeners, they're just going to enjoy the musicality of it as well as the vocal performance and just find it fascinating. Yeah, great sort of like mixture of different main key sigs per part, with lots of twists and turns compositionally, with a type sort of performance across the board there. The studio recording, mixing, mastering is good. I like the sound of it. It's not pushed in the, it's like not over compressed. There's dynamic range to it. Music surrounds you in the headphones, lots of interesting instruments sort of peppered around the place there. The vocals aren't overproduced there. There's reverb tails and a bit of compression EQing to those just to kind of help them sit and kind of niche with other elements there, but they're not too sort of like, not too dominant. And I think that a lot of the changes of quote unquote feel come from the amount of instrumental layers we have at a certain point in time, but that's not due to like a resonant frequency or anything like that. Things are well niched. With their own sort of positions in it. Again, as part of the kind of the deliberate choice of the pitch in which to put a certain vocal line in there to kind of help a niche on top there for the affectation it requires. It's nice and loud without pumping, you know, there's a bit of side chaining on the kick, but not to a point where it's a dance track. And I just got to sort of give a shout out finally to the writing of it. Like I know I've already gone over that part, but just to be able to get all these different elements in such a busy arrangement to kind of be in a position where you listen to the track again and you hear those extra little bits and pieces. They're like, there's just too much for us to absorb in a first take, so the second try we have a different experience. I feel like that's worth mentioning. It's a really positive thing there. It means it has re-listen value, which is good. And it's just a really great start, you know, precedent for the album in general. We've got I Am the Power, featuring Siberiel. Let us do this. Track number 2. Continued use of orchestral drums.
Best of the best. It's time to fulfill my destiny. Oh, who oppose order will fear me. I'll be worshipped with love.
Great offbeat ride, that was. I like the vocal overdubs here. And also just to have a sub lead here to allow us to absorb the narrative thus far. great
to
drum
bring
fill.
order to all. Everyone will learn to do the small, crystallized status all together. A pure, flawless diamond forever. I roll off from above with a sapphire glow. All fear me.
Okay, that's interesting. I feel like that one... I'm gonna be honest. I'm having a little bit of trouble reading the text. It's okay for us to want to use a creative font, and I think maybe for the branding, the style, I think we're doing there. But if you're wondering why I'm not reading the words immediately, it's because I'm just not sure what they say. Like, that's a bit better because it's a bit more sort of like blockish, but you know. Kitty! This video has been approved by the amazing Effie. I mean, again, it's just so wonderfully creative. I love the personality behind it, but I also like that it's been performed and written well. You know, because personality is great, but if you can also back that up with some sort of something more tangible, it's just icing on the cake, really, at that point, I suppose. We have track number 2, titled "I Am the Power," featuring Siberiel. What do we think this track is about? I think this track is about an all-powering, all-knowing kind of like goddess or an angel there that wants to... There was like a mention of the Barbenheimer, so I assume maybe that the parallel there is that they are wanting to establish like a dictatorship over the world, and in their view, if they treat everyone well and make things good, then it's worth having control over everyone, if I'm not mistaken. And so I assume we're probably going to at least potentially get a counterpoint from the people within the Nemesis Elite Task Force of the Abyss team, which I think is kind of cool. But I think it's kind of a bold move and a sensible one to have the quote-unquote bad person come forward and discuss their plan or their reasoning for doing this. And I know there's more nuance to it that I might have missed, but I think because it sort of shows an immediate complexity to the narrative, where like it's not just an open and shut case of, oh, this person is bad because they did the bad things. It's like, when you think about it, actually, you know what, if they can make things good and make people happy, is it that bad that we're being sort of like put that they're in power of things? But then also you've got the counterpoint of, well, actually, what is good? You know, there's some interesting philosophical discussions that can come from something like this. I feel like there are a mixture of really fantastic vocal melodies and harmonies within this piece that were just really ineffably easy to listen to. And we had a great sort of vocal texture and timbre to our voice as well. Typically with the music from Hounds and Jackals, we find musicians and vocalists who are just very capable, and I'm immensely thankful for that, because if we do not find the right singers, it can just, especially when we're trying to be more sort of like personal, or like we're trying to create a persona or like a character, we need to try and find someone who can sort of express themselves in a way that makes sense for the subject matter, the context, as well as within the actual composition itself, and color it correctly and add their own sort of nuance to it without making it all about themselves, which, considering they're the ones wanting to sort of conquer the cosmos, it's an interesting take. But ultimately, yeah, really comfortable, competent vocal technique there, very sort of like effective with their layers and sort of accents and ornamentations there, and ultimately, yeah, great use of time. You know, I mean, structurally there was no filler within this track either. It was kind of similar in some respects instrumentally to the previous track, but it had its own sort of personality there, and it was kind of funky in its own little way. Again, at the start, you have those orchestral drums, bomb, bomb. They're like we're going into some fantastic kind of like cinematic experience there, and we have the strings kind of leading us up there, and it eventually becomes sort of very charismatic. The kind of that kind of pulse there, the 16th notes there working for everything to then come into unison with each other, kind of sets the precedent of, oh, okay, we really are going to what happens next. And to have the explosion of the drums with the crashes, the kick snares, etc., like with this focus on the cymbals, at least initially, with the kind of xylophone as well, kind of peppering things in the upper mid-range with the vocals over top. It's just a fantastic combination of elements there, and it does set a new personality for this piece, sort of different to the prior. I think the use of that kind of bass guitar in the low end there, typically working with like lower notes or working up the octaves there, it's just a great sort of groove to it, and I think that mirrors or niches quite well alongside the focus on the rides and the bell rides there. I like the syncopated offbeat bell rides there. They're just a nice easy way of keeping consistent kind of interest to dan 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 dan, and it kind of makes it sound like you should be dancing around or jumping up or enjoying yourself. And the xylophone as well is just a fun, youthful, vibrant texture there. It's got a sense of innocence. It just kind of plink plonks around, and it's got its own sort of, it softens maybe some of the kind of intensity of the subject matter that you might have otherwise if you chose another sort of more kind of rigorous or aggressive instrument. And I think there's an interesting juxtaposition in general between like the major leaning of a lot of this piece with her saying all soon shall cower. It's almost like the music is her battle cry, and it's unaware of the suffering that other people are going through, primarily because they don't really care about it. They just know that they are going to be on the top, and that's what matters. And to have sort of different sort of like 8th and 16th note drum grooves there, and a similar way to the previous track has like sort of like drum fills, but we're like allowing the 16th note hi-hats to come in for a change from the 16th note ride patterns, and we just fill things up there. There's not really a lot of space in this. It's kind of like a consistent march forward, even when we get to the point around the 2-minute mark where they're discussing sort of hear me out, you know, and like the kind of the characterization of like the sung and then the sort of spoken parts is maybe being a bit more sort of conversational, playful, just sort of, it just adds more to the lore, you know. It's not just a proclamation, it's a, no really, even when I'm not sort of like trying to push, I'm still just as sort of serious about it. And we have more of the choirs in the background as well in certain parts there, which I think just makes it sound quote unquote epic. Like you can imagine the more voices in there, it just sounds like you'd be going to like a live gig or something like that. It sounds larger than life. And there are all these kind of overlapping vocal lines around the 3-minute 06 mark, which I dig because it's just so vivid and it's a natural sort of development there. Oh, you have melodies, okay. Oh, you have harmonies, okay. Oh, now we have harmonies plus additional kind of call and responding lines there. It's just more and more as we build towards that climax, that finale. And there's this like dun 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 dun, which kind of has an interesting similarity to some of the leanings melodically phrasing wise to the prior track, but clearly it's far more positive here because we're in the driver's seat as opposed to the people rising up against the one who wants to everyone to assimilate. It's I don't think this track would have worked as well if you'd gone from minor orient here. I think you needed to really sort of play into it being from you know, Zabero's perspective. And just like with Don't Stiff the Ferryman, I just want to mention that the sort of main bom bom bom, that theme that we had at the end, it's so clever to put that in because it ties the album together. It's basically saying, hey, I know that we've just had this chapter, this specific angle here, but also just in case you get too distracted by this, you have to remember that this is not actually a good situation, that things are about to go horribly wrong. And that after that, just as a final note, after the track ends and she says, oh, fear me, they're in control of it. And just at the end where she says, oh, fear me there, it's like, oh, I was getting pumped and enjoying my time listening through this, and it just teaches you to actively listen because I just as a closing note, I suppose, on the way it's performed or written, sometimes you can not pay too close attention to the lyrics or something and then realizing that you're kind of vibing along to a horrific message, and I think this is potentially one of it. Not nearly as kind of like sinister or awful as some of the stuff that I've heard in my time doing reviews where if you pay attention, you're like, oh, that is horrific, but just, yeah, it teaches you to pay attention. Yeah, thematically, again, I mentioned that the major theme, the major key with the leanings there, really sort of reinforcing the brightness of a lot of those elements there and the glory of it, despite the consequences, is an interesting sort of like juxtaposition. I dig that, it's very clever. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering, again, just a really well captured vocal performance there. Again, everyone we've heard so far can clearly sing very well, and they're using their natural ranges to make them sort of like have presence within the mix, but also they're allowing themselves room within the stereo field. Like the most interesting part for me, I suppose, is the bass guitar. So this is something I don't really hear too often, but the bass kind of sounds like it's a little bit to the left. And it's just kind of cool to have the bass to the left, but then like the cymbals to the right. Or at least the right cymbals to the right. Dum dum, ding ding ding. You know, it's unconventional Usually you'd have the bass in the center regardless, but we're really just trying to make as much room as possible for Sub-Aerial. It's just a fun little sort of bit of context. And just even the little kind of trills, the really fast playing on the xylophone in certain parts there for a bit of tension and kind of angst there, especially with the danger of some of the audiovisual experience there. It's all balanced neatly, glued nicely without ruining the natural sort of tone of these instruments. And yeah, generally it's commercial grade in terms of the production. I really dig this one. It's very polished. 2 for 2. We've got Beware the GIT'CHEEKEE next. GIT'CHEEKEE, featuring Matt, Ra, and Mum Pup. I genuinely don't know what I'm getting myself into, but this should be good. Cool.
Beware! GIT'CHEEKEE!
I love the heavy metal style. I see a great pulse to it.
On the astral plane, serving the Lich Queen. Marauders with psychic brains, haunting extreme. Crushing, killing, looting, piracy. Slashing silver sabers, GIT'CHEEKEE. That's me. Howling, tricking, walking, vanity. Complete vanity. Beware crossing, landing, GIT'CHEEKEE.
Interesting combination of hand drums with distorted guitars though. An acoustic drum kit. Oh, is that it? That was so short though. That was such a short track. I'm not sure what it's about apart from bewaring the GIT'CHEEKEE. It's a doggy. Okay. Take 2. I don't think that dog is too terrifying. That dun 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 dun, that melody in the background though is super dope though. I love that instrument there. It's just a really fascinating sort of motif. But what do we think this track is about? Beware the GIT'CHEEKEE. I'm gonna level with you. I don't have enough context to be able to understand what Beware the GIT'CHEEKEE is about. They say looting and death and piracy, so I assume that the GIT'CHEEKEE is like some sort of demon, you know, some sort of horrific demon that is a member of the elite task force of the Abyss, and they're like so powerful that they are potentially a threat to the angel on top, if I'm not mistaken. I like the Egyptian imagery to it. I also think that it was cool to have the kind of growled, gritty vocal style from the vocalist. Even though I didn't get the words through clearly, I think part of it is simply because the song was short enough for me to not be able to understand some of the words clearly and therefore not have enough context. But I suppose in that sense, if it was literally just to warn you about the GIT'CHEEKEE, then it technically worked. I could hear some growled, kind of gritty vocal fry-ish parts there, and it sounded kind of very gristly, and I can imagine that would suit the tone of a literal demon or something like that. So I think that was done very well. I also heard some sort of cleaner vocals, and we hit the notes really cleanly as well, which is good. We have a bit of an accent, and that's okay there. It's a very exotic sounding track. Beware, beware, GIT'CHEEKEE. I like the phrasing rhythmically of that. It's very kind of like intense and dramatic, and I think that part of what, you know, Matt Ra does so well here is to make it more of a sort of a dramatic experience. You need to have energy behind that in order to sell it. And I think to have had more of a sort of a cleaner conversational tone to that is kind of differentiating themselves from the actual sort of like tone of the GIT'CHEEKEE, maybe as they got possessed by it or something like that. I'm not sure. Like maybe this guy in the video is GIT'CHEEKEE in like a costume or something like that. Maybe they're like two different people in one body. I'm not sure. Either way, it's fascinating, and I kind of get what's going on here, like a little bit. But I feel like typically, again, he hits the notes that he needs to. There's no issues. We don't overcomplicate the vocal performance there. And it does sound like a demon when he gets into that kind of gritty voice. So that's cool. I mean, the track is effectively like, I think it's like a minute 49 or something like that. And it's so short. And the vast majority of it is sort of like instrumental oriented. And you have like these Egyptian scales and harmonicals, like melodic minors that sort of like are present throughout the vast majority of this to make it sound quote unquote Egyptian, because those scales are literally so formative in like the eyes of the listener there that you can just kind of equate those. The use of kind of plucked instruments there, I'm not sure specifically what the instrument that is, but it's present throughout the piece there, and it's just very sort of distinct with its tone or texture, timbre there. It pierces through the mix really neatly without being too present, but the strings just have this kind of, again, they're a typical kind of like part of cinema soundtracks there for like films based in Egypt, you know, the strings kind of wafting along with the legato technique on them, playing major and minor sort of triads, to then go into some fourths there to rise up there and to have the sort of guitarists come in and have a great sense of push to them was really neat. I liked how kind of chunky those tones were through the various sort of riffs and ideas that they were playing. I think to have the drums to kind of play at a similar pace to those and sort of accent some of those things were nice there, to kind of like harder rock metal element, kind of made it seem a bit more sort of like brutal and dark. And it was a great sort of understandable and appreciable contrast to the major leanings of the previous track, especially considering the different subject matter. And so I'd like to have the distorted guitars there playing a mixture of different power chord elements, plus the kind of stringed elements like the sitar or something like that. To kind of have that on top there, peppering with the hand drums that we heard as well, there was just, it included some sort of more traditional percussive elements, whilst also making it sound a bit kind of chunkier and aggressive. And to have, again, the different vocal stylings on top of that, adding different elements, just showed the sort of like a range of expression through the piece. It was great to have occasional triplet sort of fills on the drum kit though, to sort of like change the flow of the piece there. We had different sections as well where kind of be a little bit less sort of driving with the main sort of quarter note accents there, going half notes, or half time should I say. And we just switched up the flow of things to get the listener pay more attention to certain elements. And when we go up into the head voice with the vocals at the end of that kind of main sort of chorus around like the 120 mark there, to allow things to hold, to kind of crescendo and then have a moment and then to go back down into that original sort of distorted riff. It was a signal, to be fair, that we kind of said all that we wanted to say, but I suppose part of why I was surprised that it stopped early is that I was actually really enjoying my time listening through it. Are there also some keys in there, like some pianos or something like that? Because I hear them kind of voicing some notes within those sort of keys and chord progressions. I like the use of the knife foley we had around like the minute mark as well. Like, it's just, you could have pulled that knife out and had nothing, and it would have just seemed like a missed opportunity there. Foley is great, especially when you've got an audio-visual experience, so that you can watch the video and sort of be lost in it. And does the GIT'CHEEKEE have a psychic brain and it kind of gets to people that way? I mean, I don't... I feel like I'm missing things. But it finishes on the minor key orient there, you know, with the strings, the power chord, guitars kind of calling you out, the big crash finish, the GIT'CHEEKEE sort of like screamed by the guy or growled by the guy. And you're left there kind of going, okay, well, I'm definitely going to stay the hell away from that. So I feel like the track was effective if not for that alone. But I want to just sort of applaud the mixture of different sort of more traditional sort of modern elements there instrumentally. Nothing felt out of place. I thought again that the melodic harmonic minor not only suited the use of the Egyptian scale was just a fun idea. Great to use those instrumental breaks to make something sound even more sort of appropriate for the mythological imagery. But I feel like I'm rambling now. The studio recording, mixing and mastering is great. I like the clarity of the different hand drums, guitars, drums, bass. I think the bass was nicely sort of centered around the root notes of nothing else there. Again, the strings, the sitar, the sort of plucked elements there, the Foley, everything was measured nicely within the frequency spectrum. The stereo field there was dynamic range to it. I think there were no weird, resonant frequencies. It was nice and loud, bit of pumping, and the vocals weren't overproduced. So yeah, continuous quality there across the board. This is very good. And it's just nice to, again, see them again with those outro sections, just having fun and enjoying themselves. Really important with music. We have the Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, Jab Jalloway Ensemble. Hind quarter, nice. Oh, belly dancing.
Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI. They will swallow you, oh, the SALAADI. Come visit their outpost, boys, SALAADI. Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI. Wretched eyeballs, come and be. This command seem amiable until you realize you're the next meal. Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI. Nothing ever is as it seems. And they also enjoy more than dreams. SALAADI are not meant to be rude. You just look like very tasty food. Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI. They will swallow you, oh, the SALAADI.
That phrasing vocally. Dun 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 dun. Is that Turtles in a Half Shell? It kind of reminds me of I like the reptiles, especially this colorful little fellow around here. Vile vocals, Jab Jalloway, band leader of the Jab Jalloway Ensemble. And Milo. That's kind of wholesome. I appreciate also just a little bit more context at the end here about what they're doing. Very use of Lord Foley here. Just very nice and personable. Very nice and personable. Lords of Limbo with the SALAADI is an interesting one. I kind of, again, I'm assuming they're going for the whole Jabba the Hutt thing, but there's a whole lot of like lizards and other sort of like entities in there. I'm wondering kind of how it ties into all the other elements we've discussed so far, but I can't piece it together at this stage. I'm wondering if it's like an unlikely kind of anti-hero or something like that, or maybe I missed something within the vocals or something like that about what they were trying to sort of put forward. It's such a visceral vocal style though. We're screaming there. We've got the vocal fry and we're just growling and screaming. And it's, yeah, so basically, is it eat or be eaten effectively? Is that the kind of horror that we're discussing there? That everyone's okay until you take your position for granted and then it's like cannibalistic effectively? Or maybe the human beings or the other people that are involved in this thing with the Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, are the Lords of Limbo where you go after you've met the GIT'CHEEKEE? Is that the kind of journey we're going through here? We're trying to avoid stuff in order to approach our mission, and in Lords of Limbo who we need to sort of like approach in order to be able to get some sort of like ground. Ah man, this is interesting. But just such phenomenal vocal fry there, and it says multi-tracked, so it does sound like a kind of a guttural crowd of Jabba the Hutts, and sometimes they sing cleanly, and then you get the chorus coming in different ranges, including falsetto, and it's very kind of playful and doesn't take itself too serious to it, but there's also weight to it. But there's also this kind of mesmerizing kind of vocal melody that again works around similar scale shapes to the previous track there with the melodico harmonic minors there. And it's very sort of like wistful in its approach. It has a sense of solemnity about it, where it kind of like oscillates amongst everything else, including the strings and all that. And it's just it's like it's mourning something, like it's mourning either being eaten or the fact that that's effectively what everything's come down to. Or it could also be the feeling of being in limbo, just eating all day, never moving. I'm not sure. It's interesting though. But ultimately, I just feel like the duality between the harsher vocal stylings and the parts that are in those sort of verse sections there, the choir affectations, the multiple sort of like tracking of elements are very good, but also to have ourselves by ourselves and provide a different sort of angle to our vocal performance shows we're very sort of capable on the microphone. It's very, very good. The track itself is quite a short one as well. These are not long songs, and I don't necessarily mind that. I think that if we can establish a core sort of output or sort of like angle to a story or chapter within a couple of minutes, that's good. If we're saying what we need to say, there's no need to oversell it. We continue with a lot of kind of brass and string elements there, again with the same sort of scales I mentioned before. They're offering a very sort of exotic kind of Arabian-esque Nights kind of feel to it. And we go da-da-da-dum, and we kind of like decorate and sort of navigate around that sort of upper echelon of the frequency spectrum there, and it's very kind of pretty, but also kind of dangerous. Like you're in a turmoil and not sure what's going to happen next. Like you've had a close encounter and you're just walking into an ant's nest. I think the use of the hand percussion kind of makes it seem a little bit more sort of like heavy and intense as opposed to the previous track where there was, you know, the drum kits, like the distorted guitars and the drums. I don't think you needed to have too much heavy stuff going on here. The theme, the vocal style is already enough to sort of be able to sort of put that forward. You're just going for a metal album at that point if you have everything heavy. And so I just think it kind of more sounds more like if you went into a bar like this, you know, the hindquarter, you went into a bar like this and you kind of heard the people playing those hand drums. It's just, there's a bit of menace to it, you know. And I think that the vocal phrasing, like the AABA structure to it, is just a catchy fundamental progression of sort of like phrasing vocal like cadence, like bars and stanzas. And it's just if you have like a theme behind it that's relatively neutral, or at least it continues that same kind of like vibe throughout there, you can kind of do whatever you want, but knowing not to do too much is important. I do kind of, it does remind me of the Turtles in a Half Shell, Turtle Power kind of thing there, even though I didn't watch it as a kid. I think it was a bit before my time, but like, I like that da 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 da. We have that kind of seventh there, that second there, just that discomfort between those two notes that we're not deliberately trying to sort of resolve in a way that it would suit the track really prettily. It's more that we're displaying a sense of loss despite how belligerent the Jab Jalloway ensemble are. It's like there's some potential that we've missed out on and we're kind of mourning the loss of. And just the flow of the cellos and other sort of lower strings around that 2:10 mark there, just the kind of the sadness to it is palpable there. It's very much a case of we walked into somewhere to try and get a certain thing, we left feeling sort of like deflated. Yeah, I think that it was good to go back to orchestral elements today. It kind of brings it back to a midpoint of some of those compositions we had in the earlier part of the album. The studio production continues to be compelling and efficient there. Great sort of sense of presence of the vocals in the mix, even though I didn't get all the words through clearly. I just think it was meant to be like a texture timbre thing. I'm sure if I had another listen through it, I'd probably get it. But either way, the words I'm getting through kind of make sense. And again, that extra bit of context with the eating and everything all the time at the end was very, very good. I don't think there were captions enabled on this specific video, here. I'm wondering if that's something we can maybe look into in future for the fourth song here. But still, either way, I like that there was a bit of lore at the end there. And even though I'm not really sure how I placed in the album in general, like what the crux is, I feel like we don't have enough time to be able to sort of, I feel like we have enough time to sort of come to a conclusion within these next two tracks. But ultimately, still, we'll see how we go. We have Fair Sequestria, track number 5, featuring an equine ensemble. It does sound very regal. Great use of military drums there.
Fair Sequestria, land of the equine, we all pledge our lives for thee. Fair Sequestria, fields green and skies blue, we would die for you.
There is a really interesting thing going on here, and I don't know if I'm going insane or if I'm just like having a moment. I can hear a resonance to those lower drums. Maybe it's something else I can hear, but just like I can feel the vibration through my body of some of those lower hits there. It could just be a moment.
Fair Sequestria, once we were warriors fierce and proud. Fair Sequestria, until come the celestial clouds, we were warriors with horns that could pierce some mortal steel, crushing your enemies' broken forms under our wolves' heels.
I mean, horses are pretty badass, to be fair.
Ours as our meals, magnificent equines that could never be made to kneel, never yoked to the harness or wheel. Fair Sequestria, once we were warriors fierce and proud. Fair Sequestria, until come the celestial clouds. The pact with Celestia was a one-sided relation. The Celestials were to share resources with our great nation. Instead their imaginations have weakened the spirit of our population. Our settlement now protectorate of angelic hosts, with the earth reduced from consuming flesh, now eating oats. Fair Sequestria, once we were warriors fierce and proud. Fair Sequestria, until come the celestial clouds. Our herd turned into beasts of burden by design, now enslaved to carrying on our back the so-called divine. But now we must all hold the line, but now we must all hold the line. Fair Sequestria, we shall be free from the oppressor's hand. Fair Sequestria, let us restore the greatness of our land, the greatness of our land, the greatness of our land, the greatness of our land.
I don't know about that one. I mean, like, I kind of understand what they're talking about with like the subjugation, having to deal with like sort of like serve the divine. I'm still catching up to how the previous track came into it. Nightfall, Imago, the last defender of Avalon. Thomas Hoffman, General Pergasus. Extra harmonies by Volodymyr Chikhovich and Father Unicornelius. The trumpet sounds, the tuba should I say, sounds great though. I love the tone of the tuba. Wait, hang on. All my logic, I'm back, I'm home. All the time it was, we finally did it, you maniacs. You sold out. Ah, damn you. Logic, damn you, all to the void. Enough with the equine, time for some canine. Kiara and Bucky. That sounds far-fetched to me. Man, I love that I had no idea what I was getting into with this music, because it just makes it so much more exciting, you know? It makes it more exciting when you're unsure of the journey you're going on with this. This song here, Fair Sequestria, featuring a Guinean ensemble, I say this in the most caring way possible. I think that we chose the correct time to stop the song. I feel like we had been continuing to develop it, but that I was kind of getting to a point where the theme was kind of grating at me a little bit. And I'd kind of, maybe that was the intent for it to get stuck in your head and to be kind of very sort of affronting, but I'm going to try and talk about this in a constructive way because I don't want to be dismissive or I don't want to diminish the effort put in because I can tell a lot of effort's been put in. I love the ensemble, the brass, the marching drums, etc. at the beginning of the piece there. I think it's fantastic. It's really good. And the reason I'm not mentioning the vocals first is because I want to establish context to the structure of the piece as we go through it. I think that, and it's kind of like a compliment sandwich, I suppose. I think that, again, we have this kind of measure of regality to it. It's very high and mighty, and it sounds like an anthem. They're like the national anthem of Sequestria, and in that essence, it works incredibly well, and I appreciate it. I feel like it plays the notes it needs to. You can kind of imagine the horses getting on display, ready to sort of show their own pride. And I feel like the main vocalist sings very well. They're comfortable in the head chest voice. I'm not sure if English is their first language, but the words come through clearly, and I feel like we have great vocal technique. And I think that when we rise into our sort of like vibrato or into our head voice, it's very elegant. I think what I'm sort of wanting to move toward is the idea that I think there are some sentences or lines that are just phrased in a way where it seems like we're trying to fit more syllables in than we might not necessarily be able to do so in a way that is clean. Just some of those parts sounded a bit sort of like a bit too busy with the syllables. And again, when we have the part where she sings for you, she finishes that first sort of stanza there, we have the brass popping off there, everything's nice and sort of very kind of pretty sounding. It's beautiful, it's glorious, you know, we're ready to march on and do whatever we need to do. Everything's gangster at that point. Around the 45 to 50 second part, the cadence of it is just a little bit kind of, seems like we're trying to do interesting things rhythmically, but I don't know if I necessarily love how kind of separated it is from some of the rhythmic elements in the arrangement, such as again those drums or the brass parts. Like it dances around and bops around a bit, and we do get to a resolution point. It's just, you're kind of being distracted and pulled out of it by the fact that the rhythm is a little bit unconventional. To be fair, part of it is also that I found out that they eat the hearts of their enemies, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that's brutal. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, like, horses are awesome, but they're so scary, dude. Horses are terrifying. And I feel like if they knew how nutritious hearts were, they might... You know, I know this is maybe a complete off-the-cuff thing to say, but I imagine that the horses were that intelligent to understand that they might consider it, you know. I think it's just some of the words that we're singing, and I need this to emphasize that I do not think it was sung badly. It's just the kind of affectation of the vocalist, their expression there, and the way we're trying to fit a lot of information in. Especially, I think, when it's information that, because we've got a completely new sort of like subject matter, we're not familiar with it yet. So we're kind of absorbing certain elements there as we go through the piece, and if there's a lot of narrative, if there's a lot of exposition, you're kind of doing two things at once. And to be fair, I think when we do have the backing vocals in the background, they're wonderful. I think everyone's sung well. We're comfortable in a hidden chest voice. The chords, the harmonies work. They match neatly with what's going on within the kind of the strings, within the brass, within the drums, everything else. I think that's totally fine. And the woodwinds as well. And I think when we get to that 212 moment and we start adding additional call and responses and additional bits of sort of like focus on that mid-range there, it starts to sort of hum and be very sort of pleasant to listen through. I think maybe part of the reason why I was happy with it ending at a 2.5 minute mark is because I thought, okay, maybe we've developed this idea as much as we can do in a way which is sustainable, because there have been 4 tracks so far where I've been like, no, nothing here feels overplayed. And here it was just, I think we got the nuance that we need to. We got things communicated. And I think, to be fair, again, this is not a criticism of the audiovisual experience. When I'm also reviewing this and watching the video at the same time, there is a lot to take in. It is a lot to absorb at once. And I think that that's, you know, when you think about modern social media and how kind of attention deficit a lot of stuff is, and it's kind of stabbing away, go pay attention to me, you know, like a lot of stuff you see on like YouTube and TikTok and everything like that. This is both the antithesis of it, as well as kind of doing this. It's like you want to absorb everything, but it's just kind of difficult to do so. It's just we have limitations to it. Not even when we're paying full attention. It's a lot. But like I appreciate and love the creativity. It's a case where when I listen to this piece and I think about the context of it being someone singing about their nation of horses who have been subjugated by the people on top, and they're trying to break free and get out of it, I can understand why they're trying to show pride for their land. I understand that they talk about how they used to be and how things have changed and how they want to kind of rise above it and come together. And when you have the backing vocals come together and they support them on the sides of the stereo field, it seems like everyone is singing together. That is totally fine. And I just feel in general the instrumental performance is very, very, very good. I like the actual harmonies behind it. I think the major leaning to a lot of this, even with some occasional tension or minors or some sort of darker elements there, maybe even occasional chromatics. I don't think the melodic or harmonic minor scales that we had in previous two tracks sort of worked for this. You needed to set up an aesthetic there with both the key signature, the scale choices and stuff like that, and the instrument textures needed to match. So we're very acutely attuned to that. I should also note that I think in general, the studio production is very, very, very good. It's very, very, very good. No issues with the quality of the vocal recordings or anything like that as well. You know, both the backings and the mains are nicely sort of leveled. The strings, the brass, the drums, the woodwinds, and there's other kind of cymbal shimmers, etc. They're all good. But I think that just shows that they've put that much in, and it's testament to their proficiency as musicians and producers. And just before I move on, just because I'm kind of overwhelmed by something as a reviewer doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that, again, you kind of maybe need to take your time with these songs and take them in your stead and try not to review them all in one session. We've got one more track for today titled KENOBYTES featuring Legate Lamentina.
We bring order to chaos,
Well, that minor tone.
They have such size to show us. They were angels to some,
but demons to others.
What?
Once we were humans, by a trick we made it 3 days for our identity for the time. Get all bites. Once we were humans, get all bites. Now pawns in their plans, get all bites.
Oh, Transformers theme.
You will be assimilated.
They have torn our souls apart and replaced them with gears.
They torn our souls apart and replaced them with gifts. That is the most middle line I think I have heard in such a long time, dude. That is so cool. They have torn our souls apart and replaced them with gifts. I'm gonna remember that. KENOBYTES. Martina Kester.
Oh, no tears, please. We have our tear ducts removed.
Hey, kitty. Oh, I love it. That's so cuties. I love that the cat was like, put the paw up. It's like, hey, we're doing this on my terms, you know? So just before we continue, I'm not going to be reviewing this last track today, but just there is a 7th track here, Corby and Scratch Opus Extraordinaire. So if you're liking these tracks you've heard so far, please do go check it out. There's a video for it, and I assume that it is also in the Bandcamp page as well. I'll probably check it out after the review, but still, it's probably, like, considering what we've heard so far, I think it's very, very cool. Just checking out these main 6 tracks today. KENOBYTES. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I just want to get this out of the way in case I forget in the conclusion section, these are kind of paying homage to different sort of 90s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as well as Transformers. So I'm wondering if there's something in each of these that I've kind of missed. If that's the case, it's fine, but I'm just mentioning that for transparency here. KENOBYTES, I think it's about the Celestials, like, these human beings getting their limbs torn off and replaced with hands and becoming robots and losing their souls and getting replaced into, like, kind of, I suppose, very kind of malleable, potentially brainwashed human beings, but just definitely sort of like modified. And there's the wanting to rise up and overtake the Celestials that I think is similar to what we're discussing with horses being subjugated by them. I'm going to talk about this at the end. I'm just trying to figure out how the GIT'CHEEKEE and the you know, like the Jabba the Hutts, they kind of tie into it. But I think here this makes a lot more sense. You've got this kind of sort of pseudo-operatic kind of idea with some more sort of contemporary elements sort of vocally coming through from a singer that's very comfortable in a head-chest voice, very capable of hitting those notes. The upper range is heavenly, and I like that we speak sometimes. It's got this kind of robotic kind of tinge and tone to it, considering the subject matter and the context of the piece. You know, and they talk through that part, for example, at 40 seconds, and it's very kind of intense and sort of like almost uncomfortable at times. And it's in the mix as well, so you have to kind of dig for it. You've got to really kind of pay close attention to what they're saying, and the music kind of like, it becomes almost sort of claustrophobic in parts, like you're trapped in that prison that they're discussing there. The graphs. Let your flesh be a canvas for our beautiful graphs. It's very kind of spooky, you know, very kind of unsettling, horrific stuff. And I think that those higher vocal vibratos and sort of warbles that go on there, they invoke a sense of sadness and dread at the frustration they're feeling at having sort of like overcome this in the first place, or having been sort of put in this terrible position of being tortured like this. It's very cool, fun subject matter though, in the sense that it's creative, it's kind of like viscerally intriguing. And I kind of like the way that I don't really understand how this is going to end. I feel like this is like a part 1 to a trilogy or something like that. The kind of glitchy kind of, you know, like just that kind of the roboticization of those vocal takes, and for as less of a, they become less human as they go along. They're kind of extending themselves past that point, and they're at the end just kind of wondering what the hell happened and where we go from there. But I kind of dig the fact that it's so ambiguous, like that it's not hand-holding or sort of spoon-feeding you stuff, that you've got to kind of think about it. You've got to actually take some time to imagine what it could mean. It doesn't take your intelligence for granted. Outside of the vocal performance though, structurally, another sort of like nice short track there, like an individual concept or chapter within the book there that doesn't overstay its welcome. We have a lot of those kind of, again, the marching drums, the snares, kind of nice and peppy and kind of chipper in the mix there. We have more of the strings as well there. It's more of a sort of euphoric, upbeat kind of tone with the major leanings towards those string parts as well. But then we go into minor parts as well, as we literally see her taking all those different pills there. You can tell something horrific has occurred, and initially you might be thinking of safe harbor, but then suddenly, boom, things go absolutely monstrous. And you have this kind of cyberpunkish kind of industrial kind of drums there, like, which add a sense of menace, and it makes sense considering again how people are becoming robots or cyborgs there, for us to go in a completely different direction instrumentally, as we are trying to sort of more closely convey an atmosphere, both instrumentally and vocally, with the narrative that suits what we're talking about there. It wouldn't suit if we'd used the same theme for the previous track for this one. There's like a weird sense of almost sort of like theatrical wonderment with some of the chord progressions in those strings there as we rise up and down there. It's very almost kind of Batman-esque in a certain way. Like, it reminds me of the soundtrack of those sort of like the Christopher Nolan Batman films there, with a bow 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 bow, or like a Marvel theme or something like that. But like, and the fact that we switch up the flow of those strings from like whole notes there to flow between them to kind of stuttery, kind of creating a rhythmic pulse to there without needing to have a dominant drum kit in there to kind of provide a sense of groove is really cool as well. Again, it's just we're switching our colors around. We have the choirs in the background as well to provide a sense of sort of like extra oomph behind the vocal takes there, and they're also a nice sort of mid-range pad later when we need it. The tuba, the brass is sharp and dramatic and thick, and sort of like it accents at certain points there, and that sense of darkness makes sense within this piece as a whole, considering that the justifiable minor element, especially once we start learning truly the horror of what has been occurring here and the turmoil that is, you know, yeah, it's just. But then we end with that kind of really dreamy synth pattern there with cymbal shimmers and brass and all that kind of stuff. So am I supposed to sort of, how am I supposed to take this? How am I supposed to accept this? I just don't know. Is it that eventually we just got kind of brainwashed and gave into it, and then everyone became like robots and then things were happily ever after? Is it that the original kind of like the Barbenheimer or whoever it was, did they get taken over and then we managed to get out of it? I'm just not sure of the context. I just would need another listen through of this to be able to sort of understand what's going on here, but I feel like I've got kind of an understanding of this track here. It's going to be an interesting conclusion, but I'm not going to say too much more than I've said here, aside from an overall kind of it's sort of a conclusion or sort of like discussion of it, primarily because I feel a little bit sort of uncertain. I will give a shout out to the bass though, around the 45-second mark there, how it kind of thuds and thunders around in the low end there. It's just very kind of menacing, and it evokes a sense of sadness, and that bass isn't necessarily there when we have those upper sort of register brass and sort of string parts there, almost like we know that by being more uplifting and focusing on the upper register, people will go alongside that. I think this is intended thematically to be literal to the darkness inscribed within those midsections, but also to kind of give the listener either, oh, we're vibing, we're happy, so it's a good thing, or oh no, I'm not sure if it is. I think people will approach the ending of this differently. I think that's kind of special in a way there. And if you're not sure, if you're undecided, you'll think about it afterwards, and that's what we want from music, to make us think. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering on this track as well is continuously positive and solid there. I like the way you can hear everything in the mix. I like the turns of the majors, the minors, whatever else like electronic elements we put in there, combined with the vocal takes being nice and clear and easy to understand whether we're speaking or sung. The strings, the brass, the sort of like, you can hear everything clearly within the stereo field as well as the frequency spectrum with no resonant frequencies. Sub bass is handled well with those lower synth sections. And ultimately, it sounds like a film soundtrack. So that's what we need. It's what we want. And we're going to talk about these tracks more, or this album more, in the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of these 6 tracks off an album titled Death Knight in Heaven, Nemesis Elite Task Force of the Abyss. In this section, we're going to be talking about, or providing an overall sort of like analysis of it from vocals through to production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do I think this album is about? I think this album is about, it's about the kind of higher power in heaven basically saying they want to rule over everything. And then you've got these kind of other nations there, a variety of different people involved with it, effectively saying, nope, I don't actually want that to occur. These people up in the higher cosmos are causing mischief and subjugating us and putting us in a terrible position, and so we're going to fight from that. The parts where it was more especially clear to me were the SEQUESTRIA, SEQUESTRIA, as well as the KENOBYTES part. Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI, I couldn't figure that one out because they just seemed to want to sit down and eat all the time. Although I could, I'm not sure whether that was like an actual part of the track you're going between, like a place you had to go to in order to sort of understand the higher powers better. And the GIT'CHEEKEE was maybe another part of the actual kind of like roster of the Elite Task Force. But I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know how to place it. It was more difficult to follow along with this one than the previous album I reviewed titled Don't Stiff the Ferryman. And that's not a criticism. I think here you really need to stick with the lore and understand it intimately in order to really get a full conclusion on it. I think the fact that I've been reviewing this for a while and I still maintain an interest in it is a really positive thing. It shows that a lot of the fundamentals in terms of the writing, the performance, and the production have been adhered to, as well as the narrative. And I for one, I cannot even begin to say that this is uninteresting or like ineffective, because clearly, I mean, like, it's just the music sounds fantastic, the vocal performances are tight across the board, and the production is effective. You know, it's great as well. To not ramble, if we approach this in a more structured perspective, I just think the vocal performances across the board, regardless of whoever you had, were handled really neatly. There were some moments where I couldn't really necessarily hear the words that clearly, such as in where the GIT'CHEEKEE or Fair Sequestria. That's okay. I enjoyed the tone of the vocals, even in those members there. We hit the notes really cleanly. There was great use of vibrato, kind of vocal fry when need be, melodies, harmonies. The sections like Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI with the really sort of harsh vocal styles, that was just kind of really fun. That kind of gristle and grit to it was really neat. The heavier metal stylings of some of the kind of the GIT'CHEEKEE part there with the clean and the mixture, the kind of gristly kind of fry parts were good as well. There it suited nicely with those kind of textures and timbres related to that. I like the juxtaposition between the vocal styles of the main sort of title theme there, NEMESIS Elite Task Force of the Abyss, with Mina and Mina doing two different sort of personas. And ultimately, you know, when we have Fear Me or something like that at the end of the second track there, I Am the Power there, whilst we're trying to make the track sound so happy and positive, it's almost like you're being brainwashed into something and then giving in because you're basically either you have to or because you want to, because of how they're speaking to you or how the music sounds. It's just an interesting kind of contrast there between the actual theme of the music there and how they're communicating. The parts where we get the kind of more robotic vocal stylings and KENOBYTES as well are kind of cool there, because again, you're talking about people being replaced by parts and getting grafted and stuff like that. So you're going to hear the kind of robotic affectations, the kind of glitchy kind of parts there, the sort of like effects modulated parts in there to make it sound a bit more kind of like mechanistic. There were just sensible decisions with the production effects chains. And we had the fundamentals down in terms of head and chest voice, vocal technique, vibrato, legato, etc. And we allowed the instrumental parts to be present as well, and we're not dominating them. Maybe with the exception of Sequestria, but even then it was a shorter form track, and I think that was more of a kind of an anthem there, where we had the different vocalists kind of like wanting to really sort of pick things up and build and build and build. And as I said, if we'd gone longer with Fair Sequestria and had more sort of emphasis on the vocals, there, I just feel like we would have already had the point by that point. I don't know what more could have added, but then I understand, like in terms of the journey that we're having with that piece, we really are going through how we used to be versus where we are now and how we need to rise up. So it makes sense that we need to add need to get a lot of exposition out of the way. So ultimately, yeah, solid vocal performances across the board, even if I couldn't understand the words clearly all the time. I still appreciate the effort put in, the charisma of the vocalists involved, and I also liked seeing the animals and just how they were having fun with it, but how they really committed to the bit as well. That was very believable. In the spirit of this project as a whole, I feel. The tracks were typically 2 to 3 minutes long. I think that's a great length for them. When you've got individual, really like unconventional, especially subject matter that is very sort of intimate and very sort of personal to the project, if you have a long explanation, a long kind of slow build there, especially if you're not trying to give too much away to the listener, if you expect them to kind of figure out a lot of things and kind of understand the connection between it, having short form is good, because then the person can stop afterwards and think about it. If you have like a 7 or 8 minute long track that's just straight kind of like lore, you can get overwhelmed. The only reason I think today I started feeling overwhelmed is because as a reviewer, I don't like when I can't understand or find connections between elements here, but I kind of can figure out an overall kind of connection, and I think that's enough for me here. I think it's just it's so original, man. Like, I know that sounds, but also the way that we included like themes from like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well as like the Transformers and stuff like that into it to kind of give each track kind of a tie back maybe to pop culture, past as present. There was also homages to different composers as well there, which I assume was a deliberate thing, as mentioned in the credits, but also again I think with those themes there, those kind of leitmotifs there, it's cool. It's kind of quality indicators there are fun, man. The main instruments there, because there are a lot of different instruments, And I'm not going to go specific to the individual tracks. I'm going to give like an overall kind of brief, kind of like of the main elements as well as any ones I can remember. I think first of all, I want to get the Foley elements out of the way. How there was like a knife at one point, I think, in GIT'CHEEKEE there. You can hear the knife swing. I just thought it was cool to be able to hear that, to hear what was happening in the video through the audio alongside the track there. It just helps to get you more sort of invested in it. The main instruments though were typically, again, we had the tuba, nice sort of buzz, low end there, very sort of like when it was there, you heard it. It was present. It was played very well. The notes were hit cleanly. The rhythms was typically more of an accenting or like kind of a mood sort of indicator there, but like when it just had a nice sort of glow to the lows and mids of the mix, and was a fantastic accompaniment to all the other string, all the various different drum elements there. But the strings were a constant throughout a lot of this. And I think that while the tuba and the brass were bombastic and very sort of like measured in fair SEQUESTRIA, where like they were not so measured, to be fair, they were kind of very sort of like energetic, and they were kind of really trying to pump you up there with the fervor behind it, again, the anthem. The brass also showcased a sense of dread there, and so other sort of tracks there where we really were kind of like more kind of nervous or kind of uncomfortable with it. It had a kind of a duality of being something that would pump you up or something that would send you down into the spiraling. And it's great to be able to just not have an instrument in there that can do one thing well, that can sort of be a bit more sort of malleable. The strings with a mixture of different sort of chord and sort of like individual melodic passages, kind of stuttery parts to kind of make it more sort of pizzicato or like as a rhythmic device. The strings played their minors and majors well, typically performed in a way that was more sort of like aware of the intensity required within the style of music they were playing, as each of these tracks had themes more related to the individual kind of like story that was told, as opposed to trying to connect to the niche or amalgamate the album as a whole. There were no hiccups on that front there. It was a very smooth process there. You know, we explored the lows, mids, and highs with the strings, and they were a great sort of like they're a great sort of addition to the ether. The drums played a variety of different sort of grooves on the crashes, as well as the hi-hats, as well as the ride with some interesting sort of like syncopated parts and certain elements like the I Am the Power there. I like the 16-note grooves and sort of those hi-hat and kick ride passages. They were really cool. We were comfortable having some slight like 16-note kind of offbeat snare and kick patterns there, some tom fills and other parts for a bit of transitory device. And we were, you know, we measured and kept speed and kept pace, and it was like a metronome, dude. The drums were the glue when they were there. They measured a pulse there that we could follow along to. We were happy whether we were in like normal time or half time. There were certain elements, and just ultimately, especially when we had the distorted guitars with the GIT'CHEEKEE, they just were a great sort of like partner to that. With the distorted guitars and GIT'CHEEKEE typically proving to be more of a rhythmic device with the power chords and stuff like that, it was still nice and heavy in the low end, and sort of like no complaints there. The use of the woodwinds and other parts was great. It was just nice to have that bit of flutter in the higher end and just kind of like make it kind of like soar, and it was a nice sort of playful texture. I think it's similar to the xylophone that I heard in another part there. It was just that kind of plink plonk of it kind of softened some of the more kind of intense elements of the composition and kind of found a sense of equilibrium. And yeah, generally I thought those are the main instruments. Like we never had anything in here that felt superfluous. We did have breaks. Oh right, there was some sort of like plucked instruments as well in the third and fourth tracks, lots of limbo and GIT'CHEEKEE, which really reinforced the sort of exotic nature of the the melodic and harmonic minors, that the scale choices that they used. With the hand drums as well in certain parts, they're providing more of a sort of a grounded sort of like tone to that. It was just nice to have that, especially with the GIT'CHEEKEE track, to have the hand drums with the distorted guitars there, kind of just an unconventional combination that provided a nice sort of like connection between the heavier elements as well as the more sort of like traditional kind of instruments, like the pyramids and everything like that kind of that part of the world. We didn't just have the vocals as the kind of focal point the entire time as a closing note. We had other instruments kind of take the lead here and be the dominant sort of like parts, and it was just great to not have to rely on the narrative there too much. You know, like we had as much kind of context as we needed, and we're able to appreciate just the moments of just kind of vibing to the tunes otherwise. The themes in general typically suited the aesthetic of what they were trying to describe or the intensity of the subject matter they're trying to do. You know, typically if it was major or minor there, you know, like in the first track, we went between major and minor, sort of hot and cold. In the second track with I Am the Power, it was major when the subject matter was kind of more sort of dark and kind of foreboding, kind of like you're being tricked into agreeing to something you didn't necessarily want to. KENOBYTES was kind of creepy in the sense that it went major, then minor, and then major at the end, almost like we were kind of celebrating our assimilation there. there, or maybe the fact that we took it over. I'm still undecided. I'm not sure, but either way, typically we chose chord progressions and key signatures that would suit the piece there, and as well as scales that would kind of infer maybe a part of the world that the music was from, or like a part of history or pop culture that we were going with. And again, with those leitmotifs or like tracks from other sort of previous compositions there, kind of a homage to certain elements there that were put in a way that was pensive and tasteful into the overall kind of other parts of what it was surrounded by. Studio recording, mixing and mastering, the production in general was tight. I liked the way that things were leveled within the frequency spectrum as well as the stereo field. There were no resonant frequencies and the music surrounded you in the headphones there. The vocal takes were typically well balanced there without any issues sort of hearing the parts. If there was any issues understanding certain parts, it was simply either because I just couldn't hear the words too clearly because of the amount of what was going on, or maybe just there was a lot going on to sort of absorb at that point in time. There was dynamic range to the piece, but it was nice and loud. Bit of pumping there occasionally with side-chaining other parts there, floated because of a lack of pumping elements, and the vocals were not overproduced. For the most part, I just like that they were balanced and measured and bright with a bit of, again, compression, EQing, and reverb. And we had some sort of interesting vocal effects on the KENOBYTES, for example, to make it sound a little bit more kind of creepy or sort of robotic. And the vocal fry that we had as well. I can be aware the GIT'CHEEKEE was just proper technique on their part, as well as Lords of Limbo, the SALAADI. We didn't try to sort of like smother the personality behind the people performing the characterizations. So ultimately just a really solid album. No real applicable constructive critique outside of what I've sort of mentioned there. We rode the fine line in a couple of little bits there, but overall very good. From a general listener's perspective, this music is hard to review because there's just a lot going on, but I think that it's fun music, and I think that they've put a lot of love and care and passion into it. And the actual, again, the implementation of the different vocal parts, as well as the way things are structured and written, performed, and recorded is tight. And I just feel like if Hounds and Jackals continue with this, they're going to continue to build a niche for themselves and do some really fantastic stuff in music. I'm still not entirely sure where this leads or where we're at, but I feel like maybe I just need to know more lore, maybe listen through the rest of the playlist there to kind of check it out. So again, just a gentle reminder that the remainder of these tracks are on both their YouTube as well as the Bandcamp page, description and the link. But thank you for watching my review of this album from an act named Hounds and Jackals titled A Death Under Heaven, Nemesis, Elite Task Force of the Abyss. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via the various social medias and their YouTube and Bandcamp pages, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need to help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.